In today's video, we're going to be racking barrels. Racking is part of the winemaking process where we are moving wine from one vessel to another. This wine has been in barrel for about 2 years. We're trying to remove the clean wine, get it into a holding tank while leaving the sediment behind. Yeah, as you can see, there's a fair amount of sediment here. So I'll just try to do this as cleanly as we can. Hey, it's Julian with Hardware to Hoe. I'm here today because we're racking our Primitivo. This is a beautiful wine. It's very similar to Zinfandel. We get it from the Walluk Slope, which is a little further south than us here in Chelan. We are racking with this device we call the Bulldog. This one is a very gentle option. So basically, this works by pushing nitrogen. This is a line of nitrogen gas. It's being pushed into the headspace of this barrel. This forces the wine down and up this racking arm. And this wine is then traveling down this hose here into our holding tank. This is nice because nitrogen is a very inert gas. Very inert. It's an inert gas, and it is very gentle on the wine. If we use a pump, we get more oxygen in between barrels because when we, run out of wine in this barrel, it's literally sucking wine out, and so it'll suck air into the line, and then when we transfer to the next barrel, that air is then pumped into our holding tank. This can be kind of oxidative, and sometimes it's more than you want, and so this is just kind of the more gentle process for us because we're dealing with nitrogen as opposed to atmosphere, and so the reduction in oxygen is just better for finished wine like this. We barreled it back in fall of 22, probably November, so it's been in barrel for 18 months. It's going to be bottled here in June, so coming up quick. It's at the very last stages of the winemaking process, and it is essentially finished wine. So we want to be very gentle, preserve aromatics and any flavors, any character that's in the wine. We don't want to lose that to any over aggressive methods. So we have a racking arm. This is one that's designed for our pump, and this sits at the bottom of the barrel here, and as you can see, this little bolt can unscrew. So depending on how much sediment there is, you'll extend this if there's more and you want to leave more behind, and if the wine's fairly clean, there's not a lot of sediment, you'll spin this back up so it sits closer to the bottom. We're just waiting here. There's wine being pushed out of this barrel right now. Any moment now, this is going to, run clear with nitrogen, and then we can seal it up and move on to the next barrel. There we go. So we'll shut this, turn the gas off. And so this is gonna be pretty loud because now we've got a barrel that's full of nitrogen gas, and you can see we pulled up a little sediment here. So I might actually, when we change barrels, raise the wand, how high it is off the bottom. But here, we'll just vent this. So you can see here, this is our sight glass. This is what it looks like when it's clean. You can see there's some sediment in the line and the hose, which means I probably should have had the bolt down a little further so that the wand sits a little higher off the bottom of the barrel and will leave more sediment behind. All right, so there's a few different gases that we use when we're making wine, one of which is nitrogen. This is the one you saw me pushing wine out of the barrels with that Bulldog. This is an inert gas that does not dissolve very easily into solution. So this is a great gas to use if you're ever moving wine. If you've ever seen wine at like a bar that's on tap, similar to a beer, it's usually being pushed with nitrogen, as long as it's not carbonated. The air that we breathe is actually mostly nitrogen, so this gas is actually very similar in weight and density to just ambient atmosphere here. And so it's not very good at creating a barrier or preventing any oxidation in wine. CO2, on the other hand, is more dense, right? And this is also a component in our atmosphere. But the reason we use this gas is when we use a device like this, this is actually, we call this a snow horn, this produces CO2 snow, or dry ice. One of the properties of dry ice is that as it changes from a solid to a gas, it expands very rapidly. And when you push that into an enclosed tank like one of our wine holding tanks, it actually will sit, the dry ice will sit and float on top of the wine and expand, forcing out any oxygen, any atmosphere that's in the tank through the small opening you'll leave. And it's this kind of physical process that helps us remove oxygen from the tank and helps protect our wine from oxidation. Another common gas used is argon. We don't use a lot of argon here. You know, it's a very dense gas, so in theory, it can create a blanket over the wine and protect it from oxidation, but in my experience, it's not super good at that. You know, in an enclosed space where there's not a lot of turbulence, maybe eventually, you know, argon will settle out under atmosphere. But when you're pushing wine into a tank and pushing gas into a tank, you know, gases are very light. And even though argon is pretty dense, you know, it's still a gas. And so it mixes with the atmosphere quite readily, and it's just not an effective method for clearing oxygen. I really believe in the physical process of CO2 expanding in an enclosed space. You know, the escaping gases from the tank contain oxygen and they're being replaced by CO2 gases. One thing a lot of people say is that, you know, CO2 will dissolve into wine, and that's why they prefer argon, because like nitrogen, argon doesn't dissolve. But it's a pretty marginal uptake. Using dry ice, using CO2 as your primary oxygen mitigating gas is, you know, you'll get some CO2 pickup, but CO2 dissolves into solution. It's a function of time, temperature, and pressure. And so at minimal exerted pressure, cellar temperature, it's really not a large amount of CO2 that gets picked up, and we're just not concerned about it in the end. You know, if you're seeing a lot more CO2 in your, you know, during filtration prior to bottling, then maybe it's a problem to address. But we use CO2 pretty ubiquitously and have no issues with carbon dioxide uptake. So anyways, there's our rundown on gases we use here. I'm sure there's a lot of people who will vehemently disagree about argon, but hey, what do you do? Thanks for watching today's video. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. Leave a comment too, let us know what you think, or if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see in the next video, and we'll see you in the next one.